Hey! Do you want a debate? Very funny. No, seriously. Let's debate. Let's talk about a controversial topic. I don't know. Like evolutionary psychology. Come on, it'll be fun. Yeah, well, I'm better off drinking alone anyway. Welcome all are welcome on Debatology. I am Peter Barrett and I've been in debating for more than 10 years as a competitor and a trainer. And on this channel, we figure out ways to improve conversations and come to better decisions. You may have noticed that online debates are pretty pointless and tiring. Everyone's talking about the trolls, the shills, the bots, the cyborgs, the bribe, the corrupt gurus, the pseudo-journals, scammers, crooks, or even the fact checkers. But we're not exactly making way for quality debate of policy and ideas. What is increasingly even more worrying is how these online habits have become the only reality we know. Since 2016, at least online debates seem to have completely overtaken the real world. And as we're going to see, this isn't a good sign. Everyone would agree that in a healthy democracy, we need to have debates to figure out what to do. Through dialogue and deliberation, we can find that the best ideas rise to the top and are accepted. However, the opposite is arguably true of the current state of debates, and I would argue that it has its roots way deeper than since the emergence of online platforms like Twitter or Facebook. In this episode, I'm going to take a grave tone, because there is no warm and fuzzy way to say we're screwed. But I also want to show you that there is a way out. And it's going to take every last one of us to succeed. So, let's get to it. Alright, it's Sunday morning, you're slowly waking up, and you start rolling out your usual set of habits. Some go straight to the shower, like me. Others might grab some breakfast first. The more audacious amongst you might even go out for a run. Doesn't that sound like a lovely start of the day? Oh, but I've forgotten something. And it's quite probable you've forgotten it too. There is something 80% of us do within the 5 minutes of waking up. We check our phones. We doom scroll our way through the first 5 minutes of the day and get stressed, outraged, indignated. People creating content know our triggers. We are mostly stimulated by strong emotion-inducing content. It hooks us up, keeps us on, and leaves us with the feeling that the world is lost. This type of content is also very likely to associate our negative emotion to a given person, or designate a group of people responsible for our emotional state. The forests are burning because of climate change. The oil companies, the CEOs, we should get rid of the rich and the world will be a better place. Or a book editor changed the words of a literature classic just because of some discriminatory language. Wokeism is everywhere. It's like 1984. We live in a dictatorship. Let's get rid of the people in power. Unfortunately, this is how most of us start our day. Our attention exploited because of our natural response to strong negative emotions. In a way, we could say that we spend these morning minutes checking into our bubble. One that exploits our biases, yes, but also makes us feel like we're part of something. Even if we don't engage actively with the content we're viewing by commenting or creating ourselves, our consistent exposure to the same information, true or false, systematically reinforces our belief systems. Our strong emotional response doesn't just make us feel like we're part of a group, also ensures that any information we receive will inevitably integrate our bubble's analysis, thereby, once again, reinforcing our prior belief. This is the infamous confirmation bias, and we're all subject to it. So we read, we listen, we watch informational content aimed at grasping our attention by exploiting an emotional response deeply rooted in our belief structure. What's wrong with that? I mean, if I'm right about something, and that everyone says that I'm right, then why should I seek out contradictory sources of information? Plus, information is information. It's neutral. My interpretation is just a result of facts, and there is nothing to question. I'm right, you're wrong, and you can go f*** yourself. Well, I'm sorry, but if you think this way, you might be wrong. Your exposure to information is conditioned by sampling bias that is inherent to social media algorithms. And even in the real world, the probable lack of opinion diversity within your social group still exposes you to being wrong. That's just the way most opinions are formed. And these heuristics aren't necessarily bad, but it's when we lack humility about the way our opinion is shaped that we start to make bad decisions. This morning routine of ours isn't the only problem. As often, when you put together millions of people with a bad habit, things just get worse. We can think of debates much like we think of games. There are rules, players, and at times an enforcing body. When you watch political debates, that enforcing body are the facilitators. When you debate amongst friends, it can be the one friend playing the neutral party that everyone's trying to convince. And online, it's the platform's policies that dictate the boundaries of the game. Most structural rules we experience in debates seem reasonable. No insults, no physical harm, equal distribution of time. However, we can all witness pretty poor outcomes in most debates, especially the ones taking place online. And I would argue that it's due to both implicit toxic rules and an insufficient amount of rules. What do I mean by implicit toxic rules? The primary implicit rule of debating is that one must pick a side. Agreement, concession, convergence aren't expected outcomes in most debates. Each person has a side. They defend it by arguing for their position and presenting counter-argument against the other side's position. In fact, this vision can even be encouraged by the justice system as a dialectical mechanism that leads us to the truth. Unfortunately, this approach yields little consideration and appreciation for people who change their opinion or even end up agreeing, which connects to the second implicit toxic rule of debating. Debates are a zero-sum game. At the end of a given debate, we look for a winner, which implies a loser. One person is given the prize for being right over someone else who must be wrong. This implicit rule pushes parties to both over-evaluate their position compared to what would be reasonable and undervalue the other side's position. Also, since this is an implicit rule in most debates, both sides want to act in a way that would let them claim victory in the end. Aha! You used a fallacious argument. I win. Oh, you contradicted yourself. I win. You stopped responding to my messages. I win. To be clear, these implicit rules can make sense in certain settings, such as a competitive debate or in a courtroom, where one sole arbiter or a neutral deliberative body determines the ultimate outcome. But in democracies, where each of us is their own judge, the verdict, temporary and often based on slim majorities, these rules of debates are failing us. To add insult to injury, the insufficient amount of rules in the debate game is a problem too. Though it's important to remember that our brains are magnificent products of evolution, they do have their limits. I don't want to scare you here, but we're all subject to groupthink, the bandwagoning effect.
In-group bias, the fundamental attribution error, extrinsic incentive bias, social norms, suggestibility, commitment bias, sunk cost, structural bias, and many more.
It's understandably hard to see through them, especially when we haven't designed rules to counter these biases. Most of the time, we examine these biases under the light of free will, which means we expect individuals to behave better than the rules will have them rationally do. That's a good point. I should say that I agree with it before advancing another argument. I'm just gonna say that if he cares so much about restricting debates with rules, he should go live in an authoritarian country.
That ought to shut him up.
To be fair, in politics, if a person were to manage to rise to the top without engaging in these toxic behaviors, they would be an exceptional individual. Unfortunately, I'm not convinced such a person exists. Or at least, there are no obvious examples, and the science on power and corruption suggests that it's a systemic exploit more than an individual one. So, our debates are made to disappoint. From the implicit toxic rules to an insufficient amount of rules, we should be asking too much of our individual selves to fix bad debates solely by expecting more from the players. Does that mean we should stop debates to save democracy? Well, obviously no. We need to be able to make collective decisions, and at times, this means disagreeing with each other. However, we need to find a way to fix our debates. The important question is, therefore, what explicit rules could we imagine that would make the game of debate more healthy and constructive? The answer is coming, but whilst I have you at the maximum level of attention, it is a good time to like and subscribe for more debate science. One thing that we have clearly established at this point is that we should restrict our player expectations to the minimum viable. In fact, it's a very common rule of design. When an urbanist is creating a park, she has to think of the desired path, the trail that is intuitively created by walkers when they feel that taking the paved road requires too much effort. So, much like urbanists, we therefore need to take into account what people will do rationally given the rules we provide. Now, I don't want you to get your hopes up. There is no such thing as a perfect set of rules. That's why in future videos, we'll also be exploring player-centered interventions to improve debates. In this one though, we're focusing on some systemic solutions. So, like most games, the game of debate has seen its weaknesses exploited by cognitive biases. So, what if we created rules that would exploit cognitive biases for good? Like Sun Tzu says, the opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself. The first cognitive bias we can use to the benefit of more virtuous rules of debate is the identifiable victim effect. You know, when someone says, French people are lazy complainers, but my French neighbor, he is different. He works very hard. We can exploit this cognitive weakness by encouraging debaters to speak about their own personal experience on a given topic. For example, by adding a moment of testimony during the debate to humanize contradictors. More recently, researchers specialized in polarization have successfully shown a couple of effects we could exploit for good. One, we tend to overestimate how radical our ideological opponents are. Two, we are attracted to things we have a positive attitude towards. This means that debates can improve when we design moments when counterparts are encouraged to criticize their own side's extreme points of view, as well as ones when they focus on common ground. Another set of cognitive functions we can use to create new rules for a debate game rely on preventing unhelpful reactions. Both reactance and reactive devaluation are deep psychological mechanisms that contribute to toxic debates. Of course, there are actions individuals can take to avoid them, but we can also implement rules to prevent them from being triggered in the first place. This means implementing rules of engagement that limit the use of accusatory, polarizing, and generalizing language. Instead, We can incentivize the debaters to use more constructive language or speak from their own point of view instead of attributing intent or incompetence. The big problem is, how do you create a rule for people to behave nicely? Well, you exploit another cognitive bias, the observer expectancy effect. Having a person designated as a judge or as an observer to a debate who will report according to a set of given principles at the end of it helps improve behavior significantly. So, once we put all of these paths for solutions together, we can safely make 2 recommendations for less toxic debates. First, introduce a neutral observer to the debate, which will allocate points to contradictors according to the quality of their arguments and their ability to help the debate move forward, converge, speak with epistemic humility, and avoid accusatory language. Second, implement several sequences during the debate when the other side's point of view is humanized via the discussion of personal experiences, and where contradictors have to point out their own side's limits and the other side's strong point. You see, by using the same tools we commonly blame for bad debates, we can turn the tables around and build a path to better conversations. At this point, you might be wondering why such debates don't exist. And to be honest, I wonder the same thing. That's why I created Debatology, so that together we can influence platforms, institutions, and the media to implement these best practices. But to do that, I need your help. So share this video and follow for more information on upcoming events where we're going to test out these new debate principles. I strongly encourage you to test these techniques out for yourself, whether at work, or at home, or anywhere debates take place. It is by testing these techniques out that we'll slowly figure out how to fine-tune them and make them better. So, I'm looking forward to your comments and your messages. When it comes to constructive debates, a very interesting reference methodology is called deliberative democracy. It is often used by the United Nations and many of the world's governments to find solutions to difficult problems, but it has never been implemented systematically. Nonetheless, I encourage you to check out the work of the Deliberative Democracy Lab at Stanford University, which is headed by James S. Fishkin. Of course, the member organizations of the Listen First project, as well as the Deep Canvas Institute, all employ similar methods to help improve the quality of our conversations. You can find out more about them and my sources below. There is a lot there, so bear with me. The debate is open in the comments, so please contribute in good faith and good spirit. And if you think that the topics covered in these videos are important, you should know that I work with organizations all over the world to facilitate more constructive conversations, improve critical thinking, and ethical conduct. There's more information on what I do on my personal website, phsbarrett.com, so feel free to check it out. And I'll see you next time on Debatology.